This is Jessica Carl. I'm a teacher at Louisiana Delta Community College, and I'm going to show you step by step how to calculate the standard deviation of a sample. So we have two different methods that we're going to walk through within our examples. Now we've got an x with a bar over it, and an n and a sigma in both of these. So what those means is if you have an x, that's really just a data value. If you have an x with a bar over it, that's the sample mean. If you have a lowercase n, that's the sample size. And if you have the Greek letter sigma, that means summation or addition. Okay, so we're going to find the standard deviation for the given data set below using method 1. And method 1 is what we're going to call this right here. Remember, s, lowercase s, that is the sample standard deviation. So it's going to be the square root of, sigma, that means I'm going to add up. What I'm going to add is this right here. So x, and these are going to be my x values right here. And then minus x bar, that's going to be the mean. Once I have all those, I'm going to square them and then divide by n minus 1. Okay, so first, before we begin, what is the first step? Go ahead and calculate this step on your own. So the first step is to find the mean. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take each one of these data values here, and we're going to add them up like I have set up here, and then we're going to divide by how many numbers we have in our data set. So we have 8 numbers in our data set, so we're going to divide by 8. So if we add the top right here, the 10.47, 12.12, 23.09, 23.89, 16.33, 2.14, 21, and 16.45. We add all that up, we should get 125.49 divided by 8. When we do that, we get 15.68625. Now they asked us to round to 2 decimal places. So in all of our calculations, before we get to the very end, I'm going to go to 3 decimal places and then round to 2 decimal places at the very end. Okay, so that's going to give us 15.686. Now notice I am using x with a bar over it because remember, that means sample mean. Okay, what is the second step? Go ahead and calculate this step on your own. The second step is to find all the derivatives. So a derivative, or sorry, deviation. So we're going to find all the deviations. So what a deviation is your data value. So we have an x right here, minus the sample mean. So what are our data values? Well, that's just going to be our data set. So it'll be 10.47, 12.12, 23.09, 23.89, 16.33, 2.14, 21.00, and 16.45. All of those are going to be our x values. Now the mean that we just found, that was 15.686. So I'm going to take each one of these numbers right here, subtract it by the 15.686. So I'm going to do that for every single data value. Okay, notice, here's all my data values, and then we are subtracting them by the mean. Okay, we're going to get an answer for each one. For the first one, that's going to be negative 5.216. Remember, I'm only going to 3 decimal places because they're asking me to round to 2 decimal places. So I'm going one more than what they're asking, and I'll round to 2 at the very end. Then you'll get negative 3.566, 7.404, 8.204, 0.644, negative 13.546, 5.314, and 0.764. So these right here, all of these are our deviations. Okay, what is the third step? Go ahead and calculate this step on your own. So the third step is to square the deviations. Okay, so we just found our deviations to be these right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take each one of these deviations and we're going to square them. And you do include the sign as well. So I'm going to go ahead and square each one of my deviations, and we'll go ahead and figure what that is. So we have negative 5.216 squared. That'll give me 27.206656. Then we have negative 3.566 squared. That will give us 12.716356. Then we have 7.404 squared. That will give us 54.819216. Then we have 8.204 squared, and that will give us 67.305616. 0.644 squared is 0.414736. Negative 13.546 squared, that is 183.494116. 5.314 squared is 28.238596. And 0.764 squared, that is 0.583696. Okay? Now, notice I multiplied a negative times a negative. That will always give us a positive. A negative times a negative is a positive. A positive times a positive is also a positive. Okay, now I'm going to reduce this down just to 3 decimal places. Okay, so I'm going to go out to 1, 2, 3. I'm going to look at this one right here. Because it's 5 or greater, that means the 6 is going to bump up to a 7. Okay, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to look at this 3. Because it's less than 5, I'm going to leave that 6 alone. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to look at this 2. Because it's less than 5, I'm going to leave that 9 alone. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to look at this 6 right here. Because it's 5 or greater, I'm going to bump that 5 up to a 6. 1, 2, 3. Because that 7 is 5 or greater, I'm going to bump that 4 up to a 5. And 1, 2, 3. Because that's a 1, I'm going to leave that 4 alone. 1, 2, 3. Because that's a 5, I'm going to bump that 8 up to a 9. So now it's not 0.238, it's 0.239. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Because that's a 6, I'm going to bump that 3 up to a 4. Okay, now each one of these, this is our squared deviations, or our deviation squared. Okay, now let's just go over multiplying signs. If you have a positive number times a positive number, that will give you another positive number. If you have a positive number times a negative number, that will give you a negative number. If you have a negative times a positive, that will still give you a negative. It doesn't matter if these are switched or not. If you have a negative anywhere in there times a positive, it'll give you a negative number. And then a negative number times a negative number, that will give you a positive number. What is step 4? Go ahead and calculate this step on your own. Okay, the next step is to add the square deviations. Okay, so we just found all of our square deviations, and what we need to do is go ahead and add all of them up. Okay, so I'm going to take each one of these numbers, and I'm going to add all of them up, and that should give me 374.780. Now notice what we just found was the summation of x minus x bar squared, because this was a deviation right here, and then we squared all of our deviations. That's what we have right here. That's what we have right here. And then what we're doing is we're adding up all of our square deviations, and that's giving us this number right here. What is the 5th step? Go ahead and calculate this step on your own. So the 5th step is to plug into the formula. So here's our formula. We have the square root of the summation of x minus x bar squared divided by n minus 1. Okay, now remember, we just found the summation of x minus x bar squared to be 374.780. Okay, so I'm going to plug that in right on top. Now, what is little n? Well, that's how many numbers we have in our data set, and we have 8. So that will be an 8. Okay, so then we will simplify. 8 minus 1 is 7. And then we're going to divide the 374.780 by 7. And that will give us the square root of 53.540. So what is the next step? Go ahead and calculate this step on your own. The next step is to go ahead and square root that number. I found that many of my students forget this part right here. They get to the very end and then they forget to square root that number. So we just found the square root of 53.540. If you plug that into your calculator, I'm going to go out to just 3 decimal places. That'll be 7.317. Now we're only going to round to 2 decimal places. So I'm going to look at 1, 2. Look at this 7. It's equal to 5 or greater than 5. So I'm going to bump this one up to 7.32. So our sample standard deviation is 7.32. Now let's look at the recap of method 1. So step 1, find the mean, and then find the deviations, and then square the deviations. Then add the squared deviations, plug into the formula, and then last step, don't forget to square root. Now let's go through the same thing, and now we're going to use method 2, and we're also going to round to 2 decimal places. So throughout the whole thing, we're going to round to 3 decimal places, but at the very end, we'll round to 2 decimal places. Okay, so what is the first step? Go ahead and calculate this step on your own. So the first step is to add the data values and also square the data values. So our data values are all your values or numbers in your data set. So we're going to add those numbers right here, and we get 125.49. Now note that this is the summation of x. That's the same thing as saying, hey, I'm going to add all my x values up. That's what I just did, and I got 125.49. And then I'm going to take each one of my x values, 10.47, 12.12, and so on. That's all the numbers up here. And I'm going to square them. I'm going to get these numbers right here, but I'm going to go to 3 decimal places, just like we did in the previous example. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. Because that's a 9, I'm going to bump that up to a 1. Okay? What is the second step? Go ahead and calculate this step on your own. The second step is to add the squared data values. So we got the squared data values right here, and what we need to do is add all of them up. Okay, so we should get 2,343.247. Now note, this is the summation of x squared, which is like in our formula. What is step 3? Go ahead and calculate this step on your own. Step 3 is to plug into the formula. Okay, now notice I have the summation of x squared. We found that. We have the summation of x. We found that. And we can find what n is. Summation of x was 125.49. The summation of x squared was 2,343.247. So I'm going to go ahead and plug those two numbers in. And then I need to find out what is little n. Well, little n is how many numbers are in my data set. So we have 8 values. So I'm going to put 8 everywhere I see an n. So 1 here, and 1 here. And then I'm going to simplify. So 8 times the 2,343.247, that is 18,745.976. 125.49 squared is 15,747.740. And then 8 minus 1 is 7. Simplify a little further. When you subtract these two numbers, you get 2,998.236 divided by 56. And that will give you the square root of 53.540. What is step 4? Go ahead and calculate this step on your own. Step 4 is don't forget to remember to square root your number. Okay, so don't forget to square root. So once we do that, we put square root of 53.540 into our calculator. We get 7.317. We're going to round to 2 decimal places, so that 7 is going to bump that 1 up to a 2. So the sample standard deviation is 7.32. So we're going to add data values and square the data values, and then add the square data values, plug into the formula, and then square root.